From the headquarters of Teleso English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Keishan Haynes. Welcome to the show. The governor of the Central Bank of Barbados has announced the restructuring of the domestic debt. Economists say it could mean people will lose money as they get less returns on their investments in the form of government bonds. The government had said earlier that there was no other alternative to tackle the country's massive debt burden. Prime Minister Mia Mottley has been in talks with the International Monetary Fund about reprofiling the debt.
You will see for these structures that are being offered that they're being amortized, I think in most cases quarterly. So it means that every quarter a little bit of that bond, so it was 100,000, but in the first quarter you might be getting, let's say, $1,000, the next quarter another 1,000. So you're being repaid gradually, but as you're being repaid, that also helps to reduce the stock of debt.
Our correspondent in Bridgetown, Kareem Smith, provides details on Barbados' debt burden.
Of course, government's current debt, which has risen to 157% of GDP, is simply too large at this point. We also know that the previous government was engaging in the dangerous practice of borrowing money from the central bank to meet its local obligations, also known as printing money, particularly to pay the salaries of the country's large public sector, which currently provides important services like healthcare and education up to the tertiary level. Of course, it's expected government under the current International Monetary Fund program will be looking to reduce its wage bill and perhaps explore the option of privatization to ensure a crisis of this nature, an economic crisis of this nature, doesn't happen again. I was also speaking to a local economist, Jeremy Stephen, who reminded me that Barbados is the third most indebted country in the world on a per capita scale, leaving the new Mia Mottley-led government to make somewhat unfavorable decisions which will invariably affect the average person on the street.
Now, after the governor's statement, newspapers in Barbados led with the headlines that Barbados is broke. My colleague Soyini Gray spoke to economist Jeremy Stephen, as you heard there, about the state of Barbados' economy. Now, he disagrees that Barbados is broke, but acknowledges the situation is dire.
Sorry. So as a result of being able to keep up with those pension payments, the government really had to ensure that the NIS was affected. So unfortunately, everybody in the country, even if you are an individual holder of government debt, or if you are an institution, or if you're not, have been affected by these decisions, even if.
So what can Barbados do to repair its economy? We put that question to Mr. Stephen as well.
So very early on in her tenure, like literally a few days after she was elected as Prime Minister, Mia Mottley met with the International Monetary Fund. She met with the IADB yesterday. Are you happy with the steps and the measures that she's taking to try and save Barbados' economy?
My face always betrays me. I'm not necessarily happy. I'm not necessarily happy, but I will say that I saw it coming, just not necessarily as dire as they are making it out to be. And when I say dire, it doesn't mean that they are applying.
Jeremy, what I'm asking you is, what should she be doing? What do you think she should be doing?
Oh, no. All right. Well, what she should be doing is what she is doing, just not as dire as she's doing it.
Okay.
If you get where I'm coming from. So she's met with the IMF. She has signed off with the IMF, and the IMF now has to decide at their executive level, their board level, that they're going to give us the funding, $200 and something million in funding over 4 years. And one would hope that she uses it sufficiently. The only thing I would say that I would prescribe that's different is that I thought that they would be looking at growth measures to help the economy grow while going through this restructuring. Whereas the method of their madness, to speak right now, is let's retrench and get things right, and then we'll focus on growth. This is where we disagree philosophically.
That was Soyini Gray interviewing Jeremy Stephen a bit earlier. Now, tension in Dominica's parliament as a clerical error forces the opposition to withdraw a motion of no confidence in Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit. Opposition leader Lennox Linton withdrew the motion because he said his wording was significantly different to one that was placed on the parliament's order paper. Now, the clerk of the House has apologized, saying his staff was rushed to have the order paper completed before everything shut down last week because of impending tropical storm Isaac. The Speaker of the House apologized as well for the error, but not without scolding the leader of the opposition for his behavior.
Everybody knew there was a hurricane on Thursday, and Mr. James called me around 8:30 to inform me that the leader of the opposition had called him at 8:20 on the Friday morning, telling him why hadn't he received his order paper, which was due the day before, and proceeded to verbally abuse Mr. James. Everybody, please take your seat. I'm not listening to you. I'm not hearing. I'm on my feet and I'm speaking.
Did I verbally abuse you? My God in heaven.
Apparently the member doesn't even know when he's verbally abusing people, but what do you expect? So the member went on and verbally abused Mr. James, and he called me and told me so. If you persist, I'm going to ask you to leave while I say what I have to say, and then you can come back after.
The leaders of Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana have signed a major memorandum of understanding on the energy sector cooperation. The MOU also includes cooperation in agriculture and security. The move comes as Guyana is in the midst of rapidly expanding its oil and gas sectors. But Guyana's private sector has been wary of Trinidad's involvement in their energy sector.
So for both of us, it's a win-win situation. And I would say for the Caribbean community as well, this is a significant step in making the Caribbean community stronger. Thank you.
This is a documentation of our commitment to do more in our neighborly relations with respect to the generation of economic and other kinds of activities for the benefit of the people of Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago.
Grenada and China have also signed a multi-million-dollar memorandum of understanding. It's all part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. The MOU will allow Grenada to benefit from China's technological expertise to improve infrastructure. Grenada is the 6th Caribbean country to sign on to the MOU.
As you're well aware, we have undergone some serious transformation in the last 5 years or so, that China has been a faithful development partner in that process, in housing and in several other areas of our economy, in infrastructural development. And China, this initiative, Belt and Road Initiative, is another milestone in that regard. And it is expected, this initiative is expected to give Grenada access to what we call inexpensive capital. And for a developing country like Grenada, this is extremely important.
China's foreign minister is on a 3-country tour in the Caribbean. We have more from Isao Diaz in Beijing.
China's Foreign Affairs Minister, Wang Yi, started an official visit to the Caribbean on Thursday. He is currently in the Dominican Republic. He will then go to Guyana and finally Suriname. This is the first time this year that Minister Yi has traveled to the Caribbean. Earlier this year, the Dominican Republic established diplomatic relations with China, and as part of Yi's visit, he will meet with the Dominican foreign minister to continue strengthening the bonds of cooperation between the two nations. His visit to the Caribbean will end on Sunday, after which he will head to New York to give a speech at the United Nations, reinforcing China's position on various global issues. In particular, he'll defend cooperation among nations to confront the rise of isolationism.
Reporting from Beijing there. An upgrade to St. Lucia's International Airport is coming. Prime Minister Alan Chastanet is seen here meeting with directors of the Minister of Finance and other key ministers. He says the upgrade to the Hiwarona Airport is part of the plan to develop the south of the island. We'll take a short break now. More news from around the region coming up. Welcome back. Mere hours before Mexico's earthquake memorial on Wednesday, security forces violently evicted residents of a central neighborhood in Mexico City. 100 police officers in riot gear were deployed to evict people squatting outside a building damaged by last year's earthquake. Dozens of civilians were left injured after violent clashes broke out. The victims say they were supposed to enter the building to reclaim their possessions, but were surprised by the arrival of police. Most of the affected belong to the indigenous Otomi community.
They didn't have an eviction order. They just arrived and started attacking everyone. They hit a number of women, they even hit children. That is beyond unjust.
We are here because we don't have the resources to go anywhere else.
The debate over the construction of Mexico City's new airport continues. Business groups are pushing for the project, while social organizations oppose the possible devastation it could cause.
The construction of a new highway connecting the new Mexico City International Airport with the tourist town of Teotihuacan is endangering hundreds of families. It's not only their homes that are in danger, but also the lands where they grow their crops.
This development model pushed by the government is not content with the land given to the airport itself. There always needs to be more land, more natural resources taken. They are pushing us out of our lands, where we have lived for many years.
At various public forums, representatives from affected communities and social organizations have presented their arguments to reject the massive project, which is also plagued by irregularities. Residents say it benefits a small group of business owners.
Carlos Slim continues to win contracts to build the airport, while at the same time, he himself is financing it through Inbursa, one of his financial companies, which has provided a loan of over $3 billion to the project as part of the private investment package.
Activists say it's hard to compete against big business, businesses which start massive projects without thinking of the communities affected, and they do this with government approval.
The Mexican business elite has had a decades-long, perverse relationship with the government. Often, you cannot tell who's a public official and who's an employee of these companies. Therefore, these businesses depend on political decisions.
The Business Council overseeing the project has recommended that incoming President Andrés Manuel López Obrador finish the construction of the airport. The government could lose $6 billion by stopping it.
We also suggest they consider the risk of damaging the reputation of our country to get national and international investment. Over the past few years, we have raised about 150 billion pesos in investments funds for the airport.
For its part, the incoming government has floated the option of building a new terminal at an Air Force base that would operate in conjunction with the current airport.
Lo que significa 77% más operaciones que las actuales.
The decision will be made based on the various studies being made by all those involved, but will also involve a referendum on October 28th, so the people may voice their opinion.
Political crisis averted. Peru's opposition-run Congress has renewed its confidence in the cabinet of President Martin Vizcarra. In a high-stakes vote late on Wednesday, lawmakers upheld Peru's government.
82 votes in favor, 22 against, 14 abstentions. The question of confidence has been approved.
The vote is in. Victory for Vizcarra. 82-22 in favor of Peru's president. Vizcarra urged unity when he spoke with the media after emerging from Congress.
The confidence vote that I received today is not just from the executive, but also a show of confidence from all the people of Peru.
Vizcarra had maintained optimism throughout, but the stakes were high. A no-confidence vote would have cost him his cabinet and triggered new legislative elections. However, that was not the case. So what's next? Congress must now commit to passing President Vizcarra's judicial and political reforms.
What we have proposed are 4 projects for constitutional reform. What is to be reformed is the National Magistrates' Council, which was already approved yesterday, and the 3 political reforms. The 4 need to be passed, and that is the request. I made an address to the nation on Sunday, and today I repeated this to the President of the Ministers' Council, to all ministers that were present, with the same willingness and strength.
Earlier on Wednesday, President of the Ministers' Council, Cesar Villanueva, arrived for the session of Congress, and he appealed to lawmakers.
Exhorto a todos los congresistas de este hemiciclo.
I urge all Congress members in this session to approve the remaining 3 political reforms, which include no immediate re-election, a bicamerality, and the reform on the financing of political parties.
La bicameralidad y la reforma del financiamiento de los partidos políticos.
On Sunday, Vizcarra had called for a vote of confidence to force passage of his proposed legislation, which requires modifying the Constitution.
Over in Costa Rica, oil refinery workers are protesting government's proposed tax reforms. Demonstrators blocked major highways around the country. They also impeded access to Costa Rica's main commercial ports and fuel distribution sites. Congress is proposing increasing taxes to stem a growing fiscal deficit. We have more from Fernando Francia.
On Wednesday, trade unions met with government officials to discuss the possibility of starting talks and ending the ongoing general strike. But workers want the government to stop moving forward with the economic reform before any meaningful talks can take place. Therefore, the strike continues, with Thursday being its 11th day. A march to the Legislative Assembly is planned, along with road blockades in other areas of the country, with demands to end repression against protesters.
Protests continue in Argentina as well. Edgardo Esteban has more. On this day, September 20th, Argentina celebrates National Pensioners' Day. Marches are being planned to the Congressional Plaza to show the difficulties recent economic reforms have brought to this sector of society. The reforms by the Cambiamos Alliance government, in part, reduced the budget for pensions, which meant that back in March, pensions increased by barely 5%. This is one of the many cutbacks and recessive measures implemented by the government that directly affect those most vulnerable. As inflation nears 50%, senior citizens have seen their purchasing power diminished, not to mention the recent reductions in subsidies for medicine. Today's protests will demand an end to these measures and also a stop to a proposal that would push back the retirement age by 5 years. Edgardo Esteban in Buenos Aires. Colombian President Ivan Duque's decision to strip power from peace negotiators has divided Congress. Some lawmakers have called this decision the beginning of the end for ongoing peace talks with the ELN. Others justify the decision, saying this is a normal procedure of any kind of negotiation. The government has previously said any agreement with the ELN will be conditioned to the release of any kidnapped victims they hold. Now, the National Liberation Army has freed another kidnapped victim. On Wednesday, the ELN freed a teenager who was kidnapped 2 weeks before in northwestern Colombia. The rebels handed the girl over to the ombudsman's office. She was abducted from her home in Orupa. The government believes the ELN is holding around 10 hostages.
The release of this girl, without any condition, as the ELN did with the other 9 kidnapped, is the minimum that the Colombian people expected. Hopefully, the ELN will continue demonstrating that it will fulfill the conditions expressed by the president.
Monica Benicio, the widow of murdered Councilwoman Marielle Franco, has condemned the Brazilian government at the United Nations. Benicio spoke with representatives from the UN's Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland on Wednesday. She condemned the indifference shown by the state towards the murder, which happened in March this year. 6 months later, justice has yet to be served. Let's take another short break. World News is next.
Queremos verdad, reparación integral, pero sobre todo justicia, pero justicia social.
How many ways there are to tell a story? The different perspectives of our nations are on Telesur documentaries. Sundays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Celebrations are underway as the Ugandan musician turned politician Bobi Wine returned from the United States after receiving medical treatment. Wine had fled to the United States to receive treatment for injuries he sustained during torture by Ugandan security forces, an allegation the government denies but says they're investigating. Wine's supporters welcome him back amid tight airport security. He's an outspoken critic of long-ruling President Yoweri Museveni and has been accused of inciting civil unrest. The Muslim Shia community in Lebanon marked the Ashura festival by taking part in a self-flagellation ritual. During a public procession, men beat their chest and cut themselves with knives and sword. Ashura is the day of mourning for the martyrdom of Imam Hussein ibn Ali, a grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. The act of self-flagellation and the beating of oneself is symbolic of the grieving process. Let's take a look at some more stories from around the world.
A gunman was shot dead by police in Wisconsin, United States after he injured 4 people. The incident took place at a software company on Wednesday. People were seen running from the office covered in blood. So far, the identity and motive of the assailant are unknown. A protest against budget cuts to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, or UNRWA, has taken place in Gaza City. Salaries and services have been slashed due to the United States pulling their financial support. The UNRWA was helping 5 million Palestinian refugees.
The decision to end the contract of 1,000 employees that has been taken by the UNRWA administration is very dangerous. This decision cannot be accepted. Since it was made a month ago, we've tried with all the concrete and administrative ways and mediations, but the UNRWA administration refused all the solutions and insists on the dismissal of those employees. So we will continue our movement by all means, such as a big protest and open strikes.
Old-age pensioners clashed with riot police in Madrid, Spain on Wednesday as they protested for higher pensions. Demonstrators had to be held back as they tried to raid the Congress of Deputies building. Politicians had to leave dirty at Parliament to intervene.
And finally, in El Salvador, cyclists are charting the future of urban mobility. One non-profit organization called PC Red believes the rise in commuter cycling demands the urgent restructuring of urban planning and thinking.
It's an incentive to get pedalling. Cycling, it's a healthy form of exercise, an efficient means of transportation, and it doesn't harm the environment. It's no wonder bicycles are reclaiming their space on the crowded streets of South America. Members of Byside are pioneering a two-wheel revolution. That's why they're urging government to move full speed ahead with the passage of legislation to ensure cyclist safety.
What is the advantage of using the bike from the health point of view, from the nature, environment point of view? It does not contribute to the climate change. Also, it's good from the economic and the traffic view, because where a car parks, 20 bicycles fit.
Parliamentarians were invited to get pedaling in the streets of El Salvador, but cycling safety can be a two-way street. The city is usually crammed with cars letting out exhaust fumes, and the reality is there are dangers facing cyclists on city roads.
Hay mucho accidente de tránsito, los automovilistas casi no respetan al motociclista.
There are a lot of car accidents. Car drivers don't respect motorcycles or bicycles, and the risk is higher for them. I think we should work in this proposal to promote the use of the bike as a way to help the environment. But we also have to establish terms that assure the respect of the cyclist.
Paralelamente habría que establecer las condiciones que garanticen el respeto al ciclista.
Meanwhile, lawmakers are giving urban cyclists the assurance that they're not about to backpedal on legislation to protect them on sometimes hostile streets.
In a few days, we are going to have the approval, because virtually it was fully discussed, and the proposals of this law are not only benefits for the cyclists, but also to the environment protection.
Sino también de proteger el medio ambiente a través del uso de la bicicleta.
During Cyclist Week, the public invited to take part in a range of activities, including rides with other Salvadorian bicycle groups. They're not reinventing the wheel, but they're hoping to change the face of urban commuting.
And that story brings us to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And of course, join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Kijan Haynes. Thank you for watching.